In this new episode of The Women's Table, Kate Carson and I dive into the upcoming US elections and their profound impact on women's rights, particularly abortion rights. Kate shares her personal story, and together we explore the shifts in the political landscape and the potential consequences of the election outcomes. My name is Tina de Keyzer, and this is The Women's Table.
Hi everyone, today having a seat at the table is an old friend, Kate Carson. Kate and I talked last year about the abortion ban in the US. In this episode, she shared her heartbreaking story with us about having to end a much wanted pregnancy in the final weeks because her baby girl suffered from brain damage and would not survive after birth, though no one was sure how long the baby would live after being born. Kate, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here with me again today.
Thank you so much for having me, Tina.
Yeah. So we talked a couple of weeks ago about the situation in the US. We talked about the political climate, the elections, and how the results impact women's rights, especially abortion. We also discussed whether Joe Biden would stay in the race, and if not, whether Kamala Harris, vice president, would be the best person to take over. Well, since then,
Here we are. Here we are.
A lot has happened because Biden did announce he's not running for re-election. He shoved Harris actually forward and he endorsed her right away. Harris has declared that she wants to win the nomination and probably will win the nomination, as far as I understand, to become president. And even though we had some doubts about Harris' popularity and her chances a few weeks ago, it seems like the Democrats have gotten a real boost lately. So what do you think about how things... It's crazy, right?
It is crazy. I'm personally very relieved because I'll just disclose up front that I'm terrified that Trump would be president again.
Yeah.
I think he's really, really harmful, not just to my country, but also to the world.
Yeah.
I think he's really harmful to democracy. So because I value democracy, I really was quite afraid at how much energy he is able to get through his propaganda. He's a propaganda master, and I was quite afraid of that carrying him forward. And I respect Biden so much for his long history in politics, for many, many years of being the one who said things no one else would say. But watching him get older to the point where it's clearly difficult to do the job, having so much respect for the years of service and for the years of wisdom, but also respect for the human body and its limitations. And so I was quite nervous about that race going forward. And I was also nervous that the Democrats in general are so hesitant to do anything big and new and different. For example, having another woman candidate after Hillary Clinton lost, for example, having a candidate who's both a woman and a woman of color, that the way things have sort of cascaded actually feels like a huge relief. It's almost like the whole slate's washed clean and we can start with a whole new campaign. So it feels fresh. It feels hopeful. I'm hearing often in my work as a support person for women who have had abortions, election years are very hard. They're hard for me still. 12 years later, I lost my baby in an election year. And 12 years later, that is still difficult for me, just for the memories it brings up in my body. But there was a lot of absolute hopelessness going on in my support groups. And now I'm seeing more energy, more feeling of autonomy. All of us have exercised autonomy over our bodies, but then feeling like no autonomy in our government. So I'm starting to feel more energy and a shifting in that way. Yeah. So I like what I'm seeing. I like the changes.
Yeah, I can imagine. Me either. I see a lot of funny responses on social media, on Instagram and Facebook. And okay, let's talk about Trump's running mate, JD Vance, because I heard one of the quotes he said was, "Childless women with cats are bitter women who are so miserable they want the whole country to be miserable." And and all those childless cat ladies or dog ladies are responding the most hilarious ways, because I see all those pictures popping up of childless women with their dogs and their cats and saying, "I'm with her."
It's so misogynistic, Tina. It's so misogynistic that one of the things we've fought so hard for, and our mothers have fought so hard for, and our grandmothers have fought so hard for, is the ability to choose whether or not we marry, the ability to choose whether or not, when, how many children we have. Yeah. And that basic freedom threatens men who feel that their only value rests on our subjugation. That is not most men. I believe that is not most men, but certainly it is some of the prominent men in politics, and it's disgusting. And it's disgusting that he would be saying things like that to try to like frap up other people who feel that way too. But I have chosen to have children and have been able to have children, but I also have a cat. I love having a cat. I also love that I don't have 12 children. You know? Yeah. And I have so many friends who either by choice or by fate do not have children. And oh gosh, are they ever the most fun to hang out with? Are they ever important to me and to society?
Yeah, I think that Trump's choice of J.D. Vance, I'm not sure what to think of it, because a few years ago, and these are a few former quotes of J.D. Vance, is, "I am never Trump guy. I never liked him. He's a terrible candidate. You're an idiot if you vote for him. And the worst of all, he might be America's Hitler."
Yeah.
So there we are. And now he's his running mate.
Yeah.
Talking about selling your soul to the devil.
I know. I mean, so many of these politicians care only about their own power. They care nothing about their values, only about their personal gains. And he can raise himself on the coattails of Trump, whether or not he believes in him, agrees with him, and likes him. Yeah. What a sellout.
Yeah. He also mentioned that Mike Pence was never in danger on 6th January, and he would never have accepted the election results 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. Back to Kamala, because I think she is much more interesting than J.D. Vance. I have a feeling that the whole world has gotten a boost about this decision that Biden made.
Yes.
Yes.
It's sort of a brave decision. The momentum is to stay always. And the momentum is to never admit that you're fallible, you know, and there's a lot of pressure because there's this idea that only the incumbent can win. It's quite brave to say, okay, I see that it's time now.
Yeah. You know, the thing I like the most about his announcement is that he never blamed anyone. It was very stylish.
Yes, I like that too.
Yeah. He thanked everyone. It was a great honor to have been to your service. He never said anything about being pressured, because we all know he was being pressured, and he never blamed anyone. And he just thanked the American people for the great honor and endorsed Kamala.
Yes. Very classy. I wish we could
Very
see
classy.
I wish we could see more of that.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. We talked about what her chances would be a few weeks ago. What do you think of her chances of beating Trump?
So I think her chances have increased considerably.
Yeah.
In that being handed the endorsement immediately was a really strong, beautiful thing to do. Mm-hmm. And of course, I mean, he selected her as his vice. What that means is that if he were not to be up to the job, he wants her to do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is consistent with that choice 4 years ago, and so good, right? I think sometimes it can be so easy to get discouraged and be like, so-and-so can't win. This can't happen. But we don't know. We never know, right? We never know it can happen. Mm-hmm. And right now, it feels like, I think ever since the debate was just so terrible.
Yeah.
So awful. And I think many, many Americans, both Republicans and Democrats, all the independents, were looking at that and saying, oh no, this is really bad. And now it's just fresh and new. And what it's done is open up a whole bunch of more possibility. And what I feel is like, well, I don't know what's going to happen next. Yeah. I don't know. And that feels like a much better thing than a few weeks ago when we last spoke, where I felt I did know what was going to happen next.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Because we also talked about, because when Trump wins the election, I mean, let's get this very clear to all of our listeners. When Trump wins the election, there will be huge consequences, not only for the American people, but actually also for the rest of the world. We also talked about it too. Of course, there are many wars going on, but the two big wars at the moment, Israel and Palestine and Ukraine and Russia, there will be enormous consequences if Donald Trump wins the elections. So let's be clear about that. And also for the position of women.
Yes.
And their right. I'm not really sure if you had a chance to look it up, Project 2025, the last few weeks.
I haven't read the whole thing, but I saw it and it's like, oh, I've heard of this a long time ago. This is awful.
Yeah.
This is awful. And also, it's been on my radar for a long time that's sort of the plan. I mean, the plan is to undermine democracy. That's what it is. The plan is to take us in a more fascist direction.
Yeah.
In the name of conservatism, in the name of anti-women, in the name of, unfortunately, white supremacy, right? Like, it's really very dangerous. It's a very, very dangerous thing. And, say what you want about America. There are a lot of ways in which we are a mess all the time, but there are, that would be worse.
Yeah, because I looked into Project 2025, and a few of the things that stuck with me are, and actually I saw this video of Trump claiming that if he becomes president, police officers will be immune from prosecution if something happens in the line of duty. This will be a great concern for people of color, for Black people, because the American police, I mean, what has it been now? A week, 2 weeks that the shooting that this woman, I forgot her name. Please forgive me. A Black woman called the police. She was afraid. She heard an intruder. The police came and the officer just shot her. I didn't see the video. I'm not sure if you saw it.
No, I haven't.
A friend of mine saw the video, and she said it was simple and plain an execution. Because the woman tried to hide, and he just shot her.
And honestly, what threat is an unarmed woman?
Yeah,
an armed policeman, like a grown man with a weapon. There is no threat. There's no threat.
Yeah.
Yes, the idea that you could have a police state like that and it would be beyond retribution. And unfortunately, because of the Supreme Court's decisions about the president himself, we are already headed in that direction. The momentum is there, and it's horrifying. I mean, this is how you devolve into fascism. This is how you devolve into a police state, and how your freedom is forever gone. Right.
Yeah. Another thing is that you just mentioned it is that the president will get full immunity.
That is so upsetting. These judges, they have always stood on they've stood on the idea and spoken the idea that what the conservative judges represent is what the founding fathers, what the original writers of the Constitution would have wanted. There are lots of problems of that, including that when the founding fathers wrote the Constitution, we still had slavery and Black people were not even fully human. Women were not considered human. We were basically considered the property of our husbands. That humans could be property at all is very much it's completely different with the idea.
Yeah.
So I am not an originalist in that way. I'm not a conservative interpreter of the law. I think that we have come a long way and that we need to go in the spirit of the Constitution rather than in try to make ourselves several hundred years ago in the minds of landholding men. That aside, absolutely, the founders of the United States and the writers of the Constitution would not want the president to be beyond legal consequence for his actions. That is the opposite of what they wanted. What is happening is that these judges are revealing their true colors, which is not actually to defend principles. It's not like we just disagree on how to defend the principles, which is what I had sort of hoped was the case.
Yeah.
And what I think used to be the case in the difference between liberal and conservative judges, that is not the case anymore. They are trying to overhaul the government to be a totally different kind of government.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're really doing it in a lot of ways out of spite for people who are not white men. And unfortunately, sometimes they get Black men like Clarence Thomas. Sometimes they get women, to be spokesperson for that. It is a minority. It is a minority position among women and among people of color. And yet they'll find like this one and that one, and they'll put them right at the front of the movement. And that's what's happening in our Supreme Court, which is one of the most powerful places in the land. And unfortunately, totally out of control.
And in addition to what you just said, and this is what also very disturbing, I think, is that the president will be able to have all the people in admin positions, the Federal Bureau, the FBI, to have them replaced by people of his choice.
Yeah. And we've seen this. I mean, he already started to erode our institutions last time he was president. I'll use the example of the Postal Service. The U.S. Postal Service, really a beloved institution in the United States. The only mail carrier who is obligated to go to the most rural areas. So it goes to everywhere in Alaska. It goes to everywhere. Like, no matter where you are, the U.S. Postal Service has got you. And it was established. I think it's actually even older than our government itself. It's really amazing. But he doesn't like it because he wants everything to be privatized. So one of the ways that he undermined the institution of the United States Postal Service is he took out the leader of the Postal Service and he put in someone whose main goal is to make it bad so that people won't like it. So when the votes come around to privatize and to get rid of it, people will be so jaded because their mail hasn't been getting where they want it. He did that on purpose. It's like very overt. You can read about it. It's not hidden. It is very calculated. And we are experiencing delays in the Postal Service like never before in my lifetime. And people are starting to get like grumpy about their mail not getting played, but they don't understand this is a strategy game to erode institutions. And so that's just one tiny little branch of government, which does not feel that important. But he's there to erode the entire thing.
Yeah, I get it. So, oh my. We also talked about, because the conservatives, every decision they make, they claim that it is God's will, that it is all about religion. I don't believe, because I'm a religious girl myself, but I cannot believe that the good Lord wants women to stay with their abusive husbands, as J.D. Vance just claimed the other day, that if you as a woman are in an abusive relationship, you have to stay with your husband because that is what the Lord wants. What do you think it is if it's not religion?
It is. I mean, it is crazy is what it is. So there are two ways you can look at this. There's the way where in our law and in the way our country was founded, it was founded specifically to prevent the United States government from having an official religion.
Okay.
That is in our Constitution, and it's very clear that the government cannot institute a religion or like leave to one specific religion and make everyone else practice it. That's like fundamental to why our country exists in the first place. And from that perspective, when all of our religious leaders, when all of our governmental leaders, all of our political leaders start to call upon God, a lot of the God rhetoric only even came into American discussion in the 50s. It's very recent. But that is not in the spirit of the law. But second of all, you can look at it from the perspective of, socially, Christianity is a dominant religion in America, and it is also a dominant cultural force in America. And so no one wants to get rid of that. A lot of people are Christian and practice Christianity. So we can look at it from the perspective of, is this even Christian?
Yeah.
And I think that's more what you're asking about. Is it even Christian to say, if a man is beating his wife and she can't even leave, like she can't even defend herself enough to just walk away? Is that really what God wants?
Yeah.
And to me, absolutely not. I would never believe in a God who wanted men to just beat their wives whom they're supposed to love. I would never want that to be the quality of human relationships we are creating through marriage.
Yeah.
And, my job is as a marriage coach in a lot of ways. Like I do work very closely with very fundamental relationship. And I hold it quite sacred and quite special. And so the idea that you could just like let it be violent, like that will never sit with me. So then it's like, well, why? How did our religion get so far off course? How did it get so far away from love? Which is what Jesus really wants us to do, is just love radically, eternally, infinitely love. How did we get so far from that? And I think it comes down to power. I think the religious leaders are just as bad as the political leaders. They just want power. And it's messed up and it's very human.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Here we are. Yeah. I heard this rumor about the Republicans in Texas. They are trying to get this law for women having an abortion to get the death penalty. I mean, what I don't understand is that how can you claim to be pro-life because you want to save the unborn, but then you are willing to kill women, to murder women, actually, just to punish them for probably making the worst and most difficult decision in their lives. That cannot be I cannot believe that that is what God wants. Okay, so you don't want to keep the baby? Okay, just kill them.
I have a really hard time saying pro-life without air quotes. Like pro-life is a marketing term. It is not actually, and I have to separate too, that there are plenty of people, and probably people listening to this, who deeply value life. And I'm not saying that's cheap. I'm not saying that that doesn't exist. Yes. And who deeply value life from the moment of conception. There's nothing wrong with having that be your value. But when we talk about pro-life as in anti-abortion in the United States, we are not actually talking about that deeply held sacred love for life, nor about wanting to protect innocence. None of that. What we're talking about is controlling women's bodies, which is it's not life affirming or life honoring at all. I mean, as you know, and as anyone who listens to my story knows, like when I had an abortion, I do believe that my baby was a baby. I'm not saying, oh, I had it because I don't think there was life in me yet. I really do feel my baby was a baby and that I ended or prevented her life, right?
Yeah.
And it was the most life-affirming thing I could do. It was the most kind thing I could do for her. It was the most kind thing I could do for me. It allowed me to have enough space to raise the child I already had. It allowed me to have enough energy and love and softness in my life to save my marriage from the stress of that. There was no path through that wouldn't be stressful in a marriage. Yeah. And it allowed me to go on and have another baby who was able to live comfortably. Yeah. We never could have had if I had had my sick baby. You know, that's a very life-affirming choice to look around and say, you know what? This is the most life I can generate in this situation, and the path through is abortion. Yeah. I think most women who have abortions are doing it from that very value of being life-affirming. Yeah. They're saying, you know, to bring a child into this situation or into my life at this moment is not the most honor that I could give to life in general.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's play the devil's advocate. What about the argument? You can have the baby and give it up for adoption.
Yeah, well, I will just say, I mean, can you imagine how hard that is? It's a decision I honor. There are women, sure there are women listening who have done this.
Yeah.
And I honor it so much. And it is not easy. It's not easy on her, the mom, and it's not easy on the baby. Even when the adoption is open, there's a wound there that happens between the mother and the child when they cannot be together. And sometimes that is a very life-honoring choice. And sometimes that child finds a home, and it's wonderful and a beautiful way to become a family. It's only life-honoring if it's a true choice coming from the deepest wisdom of the birth mother. If it's not a true choice, if you're forced into it, then the trauma and the wounding is so much deeper. And there's really it's like the ends doesn't justify the means at all for that. Like the ends, we don't even know what the ends are. When there's such a trauma at the beginning of life, we don't know how well that child is going to do. When there's such a trauma for the mother, we don't know how well she's going to do. It has to be because she wants to do it. It cannot be because someone made her do it.
Okay.
If you look at all the abortions that happen in the United States, and I can't remember the exact number, but it's quite a few every year. And every single one of those, instead of being an abortion, was a living child. There would not be enough families to care for those children. There just wouldn't. And you would have so many of the children be like my child, profoundly disabled. What would adoption have done for Laurel? Nothing. Nothing. It would have freed up some of my energy to not have to be the one to care for her. It might have kept me from going bankrupt. It would have done nothing.
Yeah.
You know, I always want adoption to be available. I want it to be one of the choices. I want us to have as many choices as we can. And I want the women who choose that path to be deeply honored. I also want myself who chose an abortion to be deeply honored. I think that that's the only way we get the most life honoring situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Sticking with the right to abortion, with abortion rights, with the changing dynamics right now in the Democratic Party, how do you think this affects the chances of passing legislation to protect abortion rights at federal level? Because she promised she would bring it into the Constitution. She did. Do you think it's possible?
I do think it's possible. I think it's hard. I think it's very hard. And I think it's possible. And I think it is the only way out of this.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
I really, really love that she's going there. I expect that whatever protections are put in place, they will not be as much as the protections that I want. They probably won't be enough to protect me. Roe v. Wade, our previous protections were not enough to protect me. That's why I had to travel.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful that you can even say that. 10 years ago, you couldn't say that and be taken seriously. And so what it shows is that more people, more citizens are waking up and starting to actually learn and have a more informed opinion about this issue. Part of the problem is that it's been a very uninformed situation. So people have opinions, but they don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
They're basing their opinions on propaganda. They're basing their opinions on indoctrination. Like they're not basing their opinions on actual situation. So the fact that this promise can be made to push in that direction, it means that they've done polling and it's popular, right?
Yeah.
Which means that the American people are becoming more educated around the issue of abortion. Do I think it will happen within the next 4 years? No, I don't. But do I think it will happen in my lifetime? Oh, I hope so. I really hope so. You need a 2/3 vote from the Congress to change the Constitution. And I don't know if you've been watching our shit show of a Congress. I'm sorry. But everything is like 49-51, 49-50. Like everything is just like right down the middle. To get 2/3 majority would take a huge cultural change among conservatives. It would take donors. It would take the people who are conservative for their tax reasons to actually speak up and be like, hey, guys, I actually care about this too. Because the people who are conservative for preservation of their own wealth reasons are often actually in support of abortion. They certainly aren't super deeply opposed to it. They would have to have a voice, which means powerful rich men would have to start saying they care about this in a way that supported women. I believe it can happen. It's definitely not happening yet.
Yeah. Do you think the American people realize what's at stake with this election? Because I understand for the first time the Democrats, well, actually Harris, she's a few points ahead of Trump, well, at least in the latest poll. But hey, let's be honest, they said the same thing about Hillary and she lost.
Yeah.
So I think that's actually the reason why Joe Biden won so enormously in 2020, because people were like, we're not going to make the same mistake with Hillary.
Right.
So do you think that American people realize what's at stake?
I certainly know a lot who do, but I worry that the fire is not quite hot enough right now. The way it was hot right at the end of Trump, right? Like, oh man, this is terrible. We can't let this happen again. Even though it's the same thing happening again, 4 years on, everyone's got, and a pandemic later, right? An actual pandemic later. I think people are very tied up in their own affairs right now. And I do worry we won't have the same kind of fire bringing everyone to vote. That said, I do trust in people to do the best they can with the resources they've got. And so there's a bit of me that just has to have faith.
Because talking about Hillary, she actually won the popular vote. That means that most people in the States voted for Hillary, but she still lost the election. We also talked about that a few weeks ago, and you advised me to look into gerrymandering. Yeah, so I looked it up. So I'm going to say what I think it is. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because this is what I understood. Gerrymandering is a strategy where the boundaries of electoral districts are intentionally drawn in a way that favors the electoral chances of a particular party.
Yes.
If this is true, this is one hell of a way to influence the outcome of an election.
Yes. And it has been used by both sides over time.
Yeah.
But in recent years, it has been used predominantly by Republicans. And it's a very anti-freedom thing. It's a very anti-democratic thing to do. It's tricky. So there are a few things at play. One is our electoral college, where a vote from a person is we're not just pooling votes. We are pooling the votes in certain groups where we then basically select people who have a few votes. And it's just a small pool of votes from these electoral college representatives. That is a weird way to run a government. Why do we do it that way? It goes way, way back to the beginning of the country when they're balancing rural versus urban in the Constitution, and all the rural people, all the farmers and the agriculturalists were worried they wouldn't get enough representation. So there are several places in our Constitution, in our government, that purposefully take power away from urban places and put it into rural places to try to make it fair. There's more than one way to measure fair, but rural places have a disproportionately big vote. The other thing that happens is then, even within that structure, the gerrymandering happens. So when they break up, if the voting district is drawn in one way, in the fair way, like you just cut it into a grid, then it will pretty much represent how people vote within the whole area. But if you cut it like these weird puzzle pieces that reach into conservative neighborhoods and reach into super liberal neighborhoods and reach into immigrant neighborhoods, what you create is something that is heavily weighted statistically towards an outcome. So we have both these things. We have written into our laws. And of course, I don't know if you've ever looked at a map of the US with the red and the blue on it. But urban coastal areas, or urban areas in general, tend to be much more leftward leaning than rural areas, which tend to be much more Bible Belt, much more rightward leaning. And so we have both of these things at play, built into the system on purpose and manipulated within the system deviously. So that's why in America, it's not enough just to get a majority. It's not. You have to get the right majority in the right places. We have to get more. We're fighting uphill. Trump is fighting downhill, and we are fighting uphill. And it's not fair, but it is what it is.
People are really divided at this moment in the US. Either you're a Trumper or you're a Democrat. Do you think that Kamala Harris, as a candidate, do you think she will be able to bridge this divide?
I don't know. I don't know. I see the way we talk to each other about politics being quite harmful. And this problem is bigger than any one person or any one candidate. This problem is, I think Trump is awful, but I work very, very hard. That's my opinion. Not everyone thinks that. I think that. I know people who like Trump. Okay. So when I run into people who like Trump, it is my job to remember that they are not him. They are seeing things in him that are different than I see in him. And if we can talk to each other, person to person, neighbor to neighbor, family to family, because this happens within families. Like, if we can talk to each other with respect for the humanity, not of the politician, of the person across the dinner table from us, I think that's what it takes to come to some sort of consensus and some sort of moderate outcome. Yeah, I do think Harris is a really good moderate candidate. She's not an extremist at all.
No.
But if we can get to the point where we as people can talk to each other, we can come to some sort of conclusion about it. And some people will change their votes and other people won't, right? But I do worry that the thing that gets in our way is not actually who the candidate is. It's that we have been primed to fight each other as citizens. That's really not collaborative at all. And it's a really harmful situation.
Yeah, I get it. I get what you say, but what do we need to get there? What do we need to start listening to each other? What do we need to start listening to the person on the other side of the dinner table? Because there's so much aggression on the internet and so much name calling. It's shocking.
So you were right. You went right where I was going to go. It has to do with the internet. What do we need? It has to do with how we consume our media. The difference between how we're showing up hating each other and just not being able to see eye to eye at all, and where we need to go where we can see each other's humanity and have a conversation. What's getting in the way is media. And the way media is right now is social media mostly. Though some people are sitting down in front of their Fox News and getting it out of the TV, that also still exists. Like that is a propaganda machine.
Yeah.
What I want to see people do is get offline more and in person more. So just moving away from computer screens and to real people helps a lot because you sort of like detox from it. But when you are on the computer, this is something I have to challenge myself to do. I'll see a headline. It'll make me so mad. Maybe even one of my friends on Facebook posted it. It'll make me so mad. And the thing I have to do, this is the inquiry I do in myself. Kate, who is benefiting from your anger?
Yeah.
Facebook is benefiting because the more emotional I am, the more time I spend on there.
Yeah.
People who wrote the article are benefiting with the like flash headline because if I comment, it gets more views. All of the people who advertise on Facebook, so commercialism is benefiting because the more time in here, the more we're like in a trance and the more we're like, yeah, I'll buy that thing, right?
Yeah.
So it really takes a certain amount of deep cynicism about news to say, okay, what's more real? This thing I'm reading or the fact that I actually know the person who posted it and like maybe be curious about them. It's hard. It's hard because the whole system is set, run on raw human emotion.
Yeah.
So when you find yourself angry, who is benefiting from anger? I'm not saying to suppress your anger. Go ahead and feel angry, but just realize that the reason you're feeling angry is because someone's making money off of it.
Yeah.
And make choices about where you put your attention based on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. So we talked about JD Vance.
Yeah.
Trump's running mate. Now let's talk about Kamala's running mate, because I think that is also very interesting. A few names have popped up. I have a few names, my three favorite names, my favorite candidates for the job. Josh Shapiro. He's governor of Pennsylvania. He might be an important candidate. This is, I read something from the internet because Pennsylvania is one of the swing states.
Yes.
Also, he was one of the first to endorse Harris after Biden announced he would not run anymore. Do you know anything about Shapiro?
No, you know what? I really haven't read up on this, so I'm going to have to learn from you at this point. It's all so new. I do slow news. I do like once a week sort of do the news.
Yeah.
So please.
Yeah. Okay. Continue. I will. Gavin Newsom. He's the governor of California. He's very progressive and outspoken when it comes to women's rights and the LGBTQ plus community. I actually thought that I expected Biden to withdraw himself for re-election, but I actually expected that he would endorse Newsom instead of Kamala. So I was kind of surprised. And my most favorite of all, but actually that's kind of petty of me, I must admit, is Pete Buttigieg.
Oh, I like him too. I like him.
Yeah, he's the Secretary of Transport, former mayor of South Bend. For me, that would be the dream team. But it's a bit of spite. It's a bit out of spite. It's a bit petty, because Pete Buttigieg is married to a man. So, and he has adopted a few children. So if Trump would lose, let's say he will lose, he will lose to a black woman and a gay guy. That must be the biggest nightmare of the Republicans, right?
One of the things I like about Pete Buttigieg is that he's so personable. Like, he really has the human relatability factor. And also, he was the first to speak in favor of abortion at all stages in pregnancy, and to speak in an informed, deep, nuanced manner about it. He is the first politician I ever saw go deep on that issue and be able to do it in a soundbite, in a tiny little soundbite. Yeah. And that is my issue. That is the issue I fight for as an advocate all the time, and an activist. And so I have a special place in my heart.
Yeah, I get it.
I worry a little about Governor of California, because California, I don't know if this is apparent from the outside, like, there are some big problems in California right now. And I think that they could be pointed to as, like, look at the homelessness crisis, look at the even sanitation, look at the red tape. This isn't how we want our whole country to run. So I would go away from California for a running mate personally. But that's not to say it's the governor's fault. It's just to say there are plenty of legitimate criticisms for how California is working right now. And so that would be my preference, is not to.
Yeah, I get it. My most favorite is Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah, I like
of course, it as I mentioned, it would be a bit childish of me to be happy when she chooses him as a running mate. But let's be honest. Let's be clear about this. Pete Buttigieg is, of course, a great candidate, considering all he has achieved, and he has some excellent credentials to get the job done. Let's be clear about that. Let's not say, oh, Tina wants Pete Buttigieg because he's gay, and that's not the case. So, okay.
Yeah. And also I will say that he debates really well. Yeah. Really, really well. And I would just love to have a competent debater.
Yeah. And you know, the way he talks, nothing is personal with him. He just states the fact. He's quiet. He's stable. He doesn't yell. He talks in a normal, quiet way. You know, and there's nothing you can say about what he has to say. You know, he just states the facts.
Watertight.
Yeah. So I heard that there would be another debate on 10 September between Trump and Biden. Of course, the debate will not be with Biden anymore. So Kamala Harris stated that she's ready, and now Trump is backing down.
I'm gleeful. I'm gleeful.
Me too.
He based everything on trashing Biden's cognitive abilities. And I don't actually know if Biden is cognitively impaired or if he is confused and befuddled by Trump's ridiculous techniques. It's a little hard to tell, but that is out of the picture now. And there's been a lot put into it.
Yeah. Well, that would be a great debate, because I think the running mates would also have a debate, right? So that would be a debate then between Buttigieg and JD Vance. So because I also heard that JD Vance attacked Pete Buttigieg about being gay and having, I know, adopted children, because it's of course not the true family.
I mean,
whatever that might be.
Adopting children. Lots of gay people are adopting for obvious reasons. Anyway, one of the things that JD is really fallen, like really, really on the bad end of my community, because he is anti-IVF. So this is another example of people who claim to be pro-life and pro-baby and pro-family, not actually being supportive of families or children at all, right? So in my community of baby loss, IVF is heavily represented. Like, there's a lot of people who come into my care. They've been dealing with infertility. And infertility is on the rise. Infertility is like quite common now, where it didn't used to be. And they like men's sperm count is 50% of what it was, I think, 30 or 40 years ago. It's like a real crisis in both female and male reproduction. There are lots of reasons why that might be. But in any case, what it means is that in order to become a family, a lot of people have to use scientific technology like IVF.
Yeah.
And that is not easy. It's physically brutal on the woman's body, on the woman's emotions. It's very stressful on the marriage. It's extremely expensive. It's not people take lightly. You can't get pregnant by IVF by accident. You have to put a ton of your personal resources into it. And people only really do it when they really want to have kids. To attack that is bananas. If you claim you want family type, bananas. It doesn't make any sense at all.
But what are his reasons to be against IVF?
For some people, it's an anti-abortion thing. So if you use IVF, you create embryos in a petri dish. Those embryos will never go anywhere unless they are put into a womb. And when the process is done, some people run out of embryos. Some people don't. And there are embryos left in the cryo freezer. Well, if you're like a fundamentalist that life begins at conception, those are babies.
Yeah.
To me, they're not babies. That's a philosophical discussion. And to some people, they are babies. To me, I used to work in a lab. I had a cryo freezer, right? I had human cells in my cryo freezer, not embryos, but like human liver cells is what I kept. Some of my colleagues kept other cell types, right? So we had human cells in this cryo freezer. If that building were burning down and there were a baby, there's not a person in the world who would grab the cryo freezer instead because it had thousands of embryos in it.
Exactly.
There's not a person in the world who would leave one real baby to die to save 1,000. No, that's not how it works. You grab the baby because the baby's a baby. You leave the freezer because human cells are on ice in many contexts all over the world all the time. It's not the same. So in any case, he's probably doing it from this fundamentalist pro-life perspective. There are also people who do it because they're so on their high horse about God and like God's will. Oh, well, if it's God's will for you not to have a baby, then you shouldn't have a baby. Oh, no. I dated a very religious man for a while, and we had a lot of fundamental disagreements about the world and about how things work. But one of the things I like the most about him is that he would say, Kate, God gave you a brain. You get to use it. Like the technology exists. You have your own thought process. Like God wants you to use what's available.
Exactly. Yeah. During our talk 2 weeks ago, I asked you if you were in charge for one day you would be the boss of the United States. What would you want to do? What would you want to say to all those people who say they are going to vote for Donald Trump?
Well, first, I would cut off all of their social media. Just cut it off. I would crash it. I would see if I could crash and burn it so it would take a long time to rebuild, including the major news networks as well. But just try to get them back to real life. And what I would actually want to do is ask them questions before I told them anything. I just want to know, like, what is it in you that feels threatened by progress?
Yeah.
And once I knew that, I would know where to go. But like, let's say I'm talking to a bunch of men who feel like women don't need them anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's a common one.
Yeah.
They don't need me. I love them. They don't love me. I want to take care of them. They don't need me to take care of them. They don't want me to take care of them. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Say it was that. I would want to help them turn towards the women in their life and ask, how do you need me? And I would really want to help the women say, I need the men in my life. Oh my God, I need the men in my life. I would be so sad if they were to disappear.
Yeah.
And my life would be flatter and poorer for it, you know? And so I would really want us to get to the point where we're speaking appreciation across divides, like racial divides, like gender divides, like sexuality divides. Do I think I could do that in a day? I don't know, but it would be fun to try.
Yeah.
When you get to the point where people can hear each other within their own communities and families, I don't think I have to tell anyone how to vote. I think it'll work itself out. Once we are really respecting and loving and talking to each other honestly, I think that we will start to care for each other in a way that is reflected in our votes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I don't have to ask you who you are going to vote for.
Don't. No.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Kate. Well, another, what would you like to say? I just asked you, what would you say to people in general? But what would you like to say to women who claim they are going to vote for Trump? Because for the love of God, and yes, I'm calling out to God now, I cannot imagine why you would vote for someone whose intention is to take away your rights.
They don't think they'll need them. And so what I would like to, I would like everyone to hear my story. I would like to have everyone hear how life can throw you a curveball at the time when you think you most are ready for a baby, you know?
Yeah.
Also, I would wonder, what is it that attracts you to him? How are the relationships with other men in your life? Why does this feel safe to you? There's nothing safe about this. What about it feels safe to you? And what are you doing to heal that trauma? Like, I don't think, obviously, I respect that different women are going to have different opinions. And because of that, some women are going to like Trump legitimately, really. And that's valid. And I need to protect that because we really need to be able to think for ourselves. And also, it perplexes me. We always put ourselves last in a way. It's part of the indoctrination. It's part of the socialization of being a woman in America is to put yourself last. And I think the healthiest world comes when women actually let ourselves matter. Sometimes even the most, that we let ourselves matter the most. I think the healthiest children are raised in houses where women let themselves matter the most. I think the healthiest cultures come from women letting ourselves matter the most, in part because what matters to us is community, relationships, peace. Peace matters a lot. So if I could this is more than just telling someone. I can't make someone care about herself just by telling her to. But if I could help women to see that our own self-interest matter and our own bodies matter and that we are truly the wisest, I know I wouldn't change the way everyone feels about Trump, but I think it would change the world, and I think it would be enough change.
Yeah. Don't you think that, because that's what I think, that these women think that they will never want an abortion because this is not about wanting to have an abortion. This is also about needing an abortion.
Yes.
Because sometimes the reason why an abortion can also be health care. Because if you're pregnant and your baby doesn't have a heartbeat anymore, you need this procedure.
Yes.
You need this procedure to survive.
Otherwise, our wombs get infected. We could die.
Yeah.
We have to have this. It's terrible. The collateral damage on women's bodies, even in the world of what we think of as healthy pregnancy, is huge, huge.
Yeah.
And then in unhealthy pregnancies, it's even bigger. Yes, I think a lot of people, men certainly, men don't even really, as a rule, men don't even really understand periods, right?
Yeah.
But honestly, as a rule, neither do women. We know that we have them. We don't know what's normal. The amount of questions I get about what's too much bleeding, what's the right color bleeding. Because it's been sort of hidden away.
Yeah.
It's scary to realize that your body has this massive power inside to create life. And that if you're not also allowed to exercise the choice to not create life, then it's a trap. It's a trap that anyone can use to trap you in a cycle of reproduction, in a cycle of poverty, in a cycle of disappointment, in a cycle of dependence. That's a scary thing to confront. And so I think that a lot of times what happens with this whole I won't need an abortion because that's not my values. That's not my religion. That's not my situation. Yeah. A lot of times what happens in that is that it's just too scary to even go there. So what I wish from women is that we would be brave, that we would be brave enough to consider that everything doesn't always go according to plan.
No.
That sometimes the reality of something is so much different than the imagination of it.
Yeah.
That listen to women who have been through it and understand that you're not so different from them.
Yeah. Yeah. I watched this documentary on HBO. They followed this a few women who were going to an abortion clinic to have an abortion. And they talked to those women, and not one single woman sat there all cheerily and happy about the fact that she was going to have an abortion.
I mean, I've held thousands of women through their abortions, not in person, but online. And it is true that the most common emotion that women report when you ask, the most common one is relief. When the abortion is over, there is a huge flood of relief for most women.
Yeah.
But that is just because that gets the most ticks on the chart. Every woman I've ever held through abortion has a wide range of emotional feelings about it. Wide.
Yeah.
Like, I was so proud of myself for doing something so hard.
Yeah.
And I was so ashamed at the same time because it's so stigmatized. I was hugely relieved and I was devastated. So all of this, we're capable of a huge array of emotions. And in matters of life and death, which abortion is a matter of life and death.
Yeah.
Because of that, expect to experience everything. And so I think sometimes people try to distance themselves from all the emotions by being like, well, it was just easy for me. And if it was, great.
Yeah.
But I think that that's not the common experience. I think the common experience is to have a whole bunch of feelings over an extended period of time, sometimes cropping up later in your life, like when you are ready to have kids, right? Oh, all of a sudden I didn't know I still had baggage, right? Yes, it isn't easy. I always say that my abortion was, in a way, a very easy decision because it was extremely clear what I wanted to do. There was no ambiguity in what I wanted to do. So what a blessing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's also the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yes, of course.
By miles and miles, the hardest thing I've ever done. And I'm really glad I did it, and I would do it again.
Yeah.
And all of that's true.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Kate. For another brave, informative, and inspiring talk, my heart goes out to the American people, really, truly. My heart goes out to the American women. And we, the rest of the world, cannot do anything about the political situation in the US. We cannot. But you, I know that I do have a few American listeners. So if you listen to me, you're an American woman, you can do something about the situation in your own country. So please go out and vote.
Yes.
And I love memes. I love quotes. And the other day I saw this meme passing by on Facebook or Instagram. And it was like, go out and vote like your life depends on it. Because it truly does.
It does. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate, for your candid and heartfelt insights. Your honesty in sharing such a personal journey not only enlightens but also inspires. As we wrap up today's discussion, let's remember the hard-fought battles by brave women in the past that have secured the rights women hold today. And with the upcoming election in the US, I do hope that the best woman for the job may win, because it is unthinkable and unimaginable that the rights women have fought so hard to attain could now be stripped away by a man, by any man. So, let's stand together by honoring these women from the past in safeguarding our progress and keeping it. Thank you all for listening. My name is Tina de Keyzer, and this is the Women's Table.